I'm Michael Singh. I'm the Managing Director and Lane-Swig Senior Fellow at the Washington Institute for Near East Policy. Yesterday, on Thursday, April 2nd, the EU Foreign Minister Federica Mogherini and Iran's Foreign Minister Mohammad Javad Zarif announced the key parameters for the framework of an Iran nuclear deal. This is a long-awaited step which culminates the process started by the interim accord signed between Iran and the P5+1, that's the US, UK, France, Germany, Russia, and China in November of 2013. The parameters they announced will now form the basis of what's called a comprehensive joint plan of action, or CJPOA, which needs to be completed according to the previous agreement signed by June 30th, although that deadline may slip just like all deadlines in the past have. The first thing to know about the deal parameters that were announced on Thursday is that it's not a deal. There was no official document released, nothing has been signed, and the statement made by Foreign Minister Mogherini, what the Iranians have been saying, and the fact sheet produced by the White House all differ in key respects. So nothing has really been signed, and plenty remains to be worked out by June 30th. When you look at the actual terms in the White House fact sheet, which is by far the most detailed document we have about what may have been agreed or at least discussed in the diplomacy, it raises as many questions as it answers. So we know, for example, that Iran is intending to reduce the number of centrifuges that it employs. But for example, we don't know what will happen exactly to Iran's excess centrifuges. It's going to keep operating about 5,000. What happens to the other 15,000 is not clearly addressed. We know that Iran has committed to reduce its stockpile of low-enriched uranium, which is that key element which you feed into the centrifuges, which, if further enriched, could produce the fuel for a nuclear weapon at the end. What we don't know, however, is what Iran will do with the rest of its stockpile of enriched uranium. Will it send it out of the country, or will it remain in Iran in some form that could still be accessible to make into a nuclear weapon? We know that Iran has agreed to invite inspectors to have a closer look at its facilities and its nuclear activities. But we don't really know what kind of access those inspectors will have, and we don't know what will happen if inspectors are denied access or denied timely access to a particular facility. This list of questions really goes on. And what's clear is that whatever was agreed so far, a lot more remains to be agreed, and the devil is in the details. Whether this is a good agreement or a bad agreement will depend in part on those very particular details which are going to be negotiated in the next 3 months. So if those things come out in a positive way, in a way that benefits the United States, is this a good deal or is this a bad deal? Well, it depends on what you compare it to. President Obama, when he was making his remarks about the deal on Thursday and announcing the deal and in a sense beginning the sales effort for a deal, wanted to compare this deal to war. Said, look, the alternative is war, and therefore this is a good deal that should be celebrated as a historic triumph. Well, if you're comparing it to war, of course, a lot of people will say, sure, it's a good deal. If you're comparing it, on the other hand, to previous U.S. positions, to our previous negotiating stances, well, it looks like we made a lot of concessions, and it looks a lot less like a triumph. Previously, for example, the UN Security Council had said in 6 consecutive resolutions that Iran needed to suspend its uranium enrichment. This agreement would clearly not require Iran to do that. It would allow Iran not only to continue enriching uranium, but wouldn't require Iran to dismantle anything, to close any facility, or really to give up any key element of its nuclear weapons program. In that sense, what this deal really does is it simply creates impediments for Iran to move forward towards a nuclear weapon, and relies very much on verifying, on inspecting, and on monitoring that Iran is in fact keeping to those commitments. And so much of this deal's success will boil down to inspections. And obviously we've been here before with other countries, and this is very tough territory. Even if this deal comes out the way that the United States hopes by June 30th, I think what we can say about it is this will be a narrow, technical, and temporary deal. Most of the restrictions on Iran will end in 10 years. Some others will be in effect slightly longer than that. But it's not a permanent deal that permanently restricts Iran's nuclear activities. And therefore, this isn't a deal that dramatically is going to change the geopolitical landscape in the Middle East, that's going to deliver necessarily the better U.S.-Iran relationship that U.S. officials have sometimes talked about. I think that there's a hope in the White House, there's a hope amongst U.S. officials that this deal can open the door for better relations between the U.S. and Iran. But countervailing that, also you're going to see a very negative reaction by U.S. allies to this deal, who will worry that in fact it will only temporarily impede Iran's nuclear progress, that it may empower Iran's regional destabilizing activities in the region, and will enrich Iran to enable it to do all of the above. And so there's plenty of other concerns that we and our allies have with Iran which aren't addressed in this deal. And what we're going to need to see now is not just the effort to hammer out the details for this nuclear agreement, but an effort to address those broader policy issues, to figure out how will we address Iran's support for terrorism, Iran's destabilizing regional activities in an environment where we're lifting sanctions, not imposing new ones. How will we reassure our allies, already quite skeptical about America's commitment to the Middle East, that we're determined to counter Iran and we're determined to hold Iran accountable even to its nuclear promises? And how will we repair the bipartisan consensus for countering Iran, which has existed in the United States but has frayed so badly during the debates over this nuclear diplomacy? These are the challenges which await the White House, which await the U.S. administration going forward, and they're very difficult challenges.